Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our first online KRVIA encounter. To begin, our first speaker for today is Jimmy Cs Lim. He's a Malaysian architect trained at the University of New South Wales. He was senior architect and then an associate of the firm Project Architects SDN in Kuala Lumpur. He established his own practice, CSL Associates, in 1978. His built works, both in Malaysia and abroad, have ranged from residential bungalows to commercial complexes, medical facilities, sporting facilities, hotels, and resorts. The Salinger residence that he designed in Selangor, Malaysia, was presented with an Aga Khan Award for Architecture during the 1998 award cycle. Mr. Lim is active in local residents organizations in Kuala Lumpur to resist uncontrolled planning, prevent destruction of the environment, and protect the natural environment and ecology of the city. We welcome him to our first online KRVIA encounter. Students, anytime that you do have questions, we have a Q&A chat happening at the site and you can post whatever required. So, over to you, sir.
Say something. We don't have very much time for Q&A because I was told that we're supposed to start at 1:30, but we're now starting at 2 o'clock and I had arranged at 3 o'clock. Okay, so never mind. So, okay, good morning. I'm very happy to be talking to you guys. Now, we are all architects. You're all training to be architects. You're all going to become great designers. Architecture is about designing. Architecture is about people. Architecture is about people. Architecture is about doing things for people. We mustn't forget that. Now, my topic that's been given to me is tropical woodwork, but I'm not talking about tropical woodwork. Just to talk about tropical woodwork is very boring. But what I want to talk about is the whole philosophy of how do you approach architecture? Now, every architecture student aspires to design. So whenever architecture students go looking for a job, they are telling the boss, I love to design. I'm a designer. Yes, you're a great designer, but what do you design? How well do you know how to design? Right? So the question here is, how do we design? Sorry, I'm trying to get my slide to place.
Cannot show. Just click this.
As I said, architecture is about people, and when we design things for people. It's about people. Now, our architectural education, the formal architectural education started in 1919, and now it's 2020. Last year was 100 years celebration of the Bauhaus setting up. Now, over the period, formal teaching of architecture have gone from Germany to England. And England, the RIPA started a school, the AA school, and then India, Malaysia, all the other Commonwealth countries, we were all part of the British Commonwealth. So our architectural education was based on the RIPA. Whatever that we were taught were all essentially from the RIPA. Now that's fine, but what is very important for me is now we are what? 200, we are 100 years since Bauhaus. Now, India, you had your independence in 1946. Now, it's about 74 years since you had your independence. Now, the question that I'd like to pose to you is, since your separation of independence, how much has architecture evolved in 74 years? So at the time of your independence, you were only about 27 years after the formation of the Bauhaus. So, where do we go from there? Have we moved forward? Now we talk about design. What do we design? Are we really designing architecture? Or are we just putting up buildings? Now, this guy, Nicholas Bresner, have described the bicycle shed as a building, but he's described Winchester Cathedral as architecture. Now, the bicycle shed is a bicycle shed. It's a utilitarian function. The Winchester Cathedral is architecture. It's a piece of art because it embodies craftsmanship, it embodies lifting the spirit of people going into it. When you walk into a space like this, you cannot fail to be impressed by the sky, by the size, by the scale, by the visual impact of this picture. Now that's architecture. So the question now is, are you guys being trained to be architects? Do you know how to put things together? You see, every part of this picture of the interior of the Winchester Cathedral has been made by craftsmen, stonemasons. They knew how to put things together. They knew how all these columns are sort of put together, joint, and they knew how these fan vaults were made. Now that's very important, so that you are in control of your design. The question which I want to pose to you students today are you in control of your design? You design, but do you know how to go about building what you have designed? Do you know enough about construction? Or do you know adequately about structures? See this picture here, all these huge columns, the massive columns going up, that's structures. That's all part of construction. Then when you do these pointed arches, you must know construction. You must know how each of these stones will join together so that the load can be transferred one piece to another and so forth. Then when you look at the fan faults up there, all these ribs, how were they made, joined together? Now that's what architecture is all about. All right, and that's very important. Now, here is a picture of a building. It's a building. I call it building. But can you call this architecture? Look at this facade. This is chaos. Look at this detail. Look at the connection here. Look at this. The designers don't understand construction. They don't understand structures. So, is this architecture? Is this a type of architecture that you've been trained, taught to design? Are you telling me that this is architecture? This is not architecture. I'm sorry. All right? Now, this is architecture. Right? Now you look at this, see, every part of the structure itself is joined, connected beautifully, sensitively, and everything is built. And you know something, these old architecture were built hundreds of years ago. They did not have any computers. They did not have any CAD program. They had no SketchUp. They had no rhinoceros. They got no rabbit. They got no showcase. They got no Photoshop. They got all sorts of shop. They had nothing. Now here you have Photoshop. You got everything, and yet that so-called designer could come up with this sort of rubbish. This is disgraceful. I hope your school is not training you people to produce this sort of architecture. All right? So, look at this. Look at this detail. Isn't it beautiful? Can any of you deny that it's not beautiful? Of course, you may not like the design. Fine. Then come up with your modern design, build it, and challenge it. But until you've done that, you cannot say anything. Okay? Now, you all want to design. Fine. Design a cube. All right? Here you are. We can design a cube. 25 mm by 25 mm can be an ice block, a cube of ice. Right? Very simple. Put some water into a container, freeze it, you've got your cube. Right? Or you get a piece of wood and cut it out, and you've got it. There you are. You get a piece of wood. There's your 25 mm cube. Okay. Now, the moment you have to design a cube that's more than 25 mm, the issues become different. Right? Here you have 2.5 meter. All right. It becomes a cabin. All right. So for this cabin, you got to now know how this member joins here, connected. This, how do you join this? How do you fit this door in there? How do you fit this glass? How do you fit this wooden panel? All this needs detailing. And with detailing, it means connections. You must know your construction. Then, to know how big this column is, this post, you need to understand structures. Do you understand all that? Can you make that? Now, over here, simple thing, 2.5 by 2.5 shed. Okay, it's very simple. Column, post. What makes this difficult is that these joints have to be rigid. They cannot be pin joints, because with pin joints you've got no stability. So therefore, you have to introduce a bracing member here. Now this guy used the bracing as the corners infill because he understands structures. So do you understand structures to be able to solve this problem? Or you'll be putting the thing up and then you'll be falling and you wonder why the thing collapsed. Now, this structure is of steel. Because it's steel, they're all welded. So this whole structure, this whole connection becomes a portal frame. And that's what construction is about. So from 2.5, we want to say, oh, by the way, this is just to show you what a 1 meter cube looks like. Is a few of these square boxes put together, and there's a human there to give you a sense of scale, just in case you don't understand. Now, we want another cube that's 25 meter by 25 meter by 25 meter high. So that would be equivalent to about 9 floors and about this size. So what I'm showing you here is what a cube structure would look like. And what I've shown here is a cube taken out of the side of this building. It's a building. I did not say it is architecture. because it's a building. What is so exciting about this cube? Nothing. Who designed this cube? Did the architect design it? Probably not. But then, probably it was. Because unless you're an architect, you are not allowed by law to sign the submission of plans in order to get the buildings approved. So there you are. So here you have a building that's supposedly, purportedly been submitted and signed by an architect, but was it really signed by an architect? Did the architect really do it? Now, a lot of you have worked in an architect's office before, right? You have all made working drawings as part of your learning about the design. Now, when you're making your working drawings, you draw two horizontal lines on your working drawings and you put the notation RC beam to inch detail. Then if you draw two vertical lines, you just put RC columns to inch detail. Finish. I've done my working drawing. I've learned about architecture. I've done my internship. So I proceed and I fulfill my internship program and I graduate. But what have you not learned? Is architecture so simple as putting a column and a beam together? Huh? By simply writing RC column or RC beam to engineer's detail? Is that what architecture is all about? Now, if that's what it's all about, I think you guys have not learned anything from your school. How can an architect who is a professional, you're supposed to be a designer, turn around and say, allow the engineer to design my beams, allow the engineer to design my columns? Hey, that's my right, that's my pride. I've got pride. I'm a designer. But yet, every architect almost would do that in their drawing. Two columns, engineer's detail. You don't do that. You know, the engineers are the worst person to entrust any aesthetic sense to them. Most of the engineers have got no common sense, but a few of them do have beauty. They understand about beauty. Well, now, someone like Pierluigi Nervi, if you have heard of him, Nervi was a great engineer. Robert Mylar, a Swiss engineer, is a very sensitive person. And then another person, Professor Julius Natterer, also a Bavarian living in Switzerland. He's an expert in timber. You should look at some of his work. Now, you see, but then these are the people who get to craft their building. They craft their design. And that is where I'm getting to. Architecture is not about fanciful design which you do not know how to build. You must be able to craft your building. You understand? Craft it, not titivate it. Right? You look at this thing. This is not crafting. This is just passing everything onto the engine. Look at the walls. The walls are just straight. Look at the windows are just holes in the walls. And what else? What is there to be proud of? Except to say that I was paid some money and really it was pittance. But that's the direction where a lot of architects are going down. And that is where we have to stop. That is why I have been talking to people that that's not where architecture is. Architects must have more pride. You must respect yourself. If you don't respect yourself, then you are as good as a prostitute. So, does prostitute have to go to a university or college to get their degree? They don't. They just have to go to, I'm a prostitute, pay me, and do whatever you want, and I'll do whatever you want, okay? So, that's what it is, but architecture is not the same. So remember that. Are you an architect or are you a prostitute? No. These are other examples of the 25-meter cube. So these are some work that are done by different architects. But what I want to show here is, see, this building here on the top did not happen just by coincidence. But it happened because the architect wanted to design, he wanted the windows, for the wall, and this and that, and he had to work out all this detail, how you connect the thing, and it's not left to the engineers. And the expression of these horizontal beams on the outside, they become part of an architectural manifestation, as compared with this one. What is there to show you? Anything. Cardboard. All right. Now, so that's what. Now, I think this project was is in the Netherlands, right? Dutch, and I think this one is also a Dutch architect. This is a OMA, right? So again, you see the amount of work, the thought that goes into putting the bits and pieces together, and all that. I mean, you don't leave this all to engineers, you know. You cannot say that the engineer did that. Okay, so now this building here, I think this one is in England, in Birmingham. Again, I mean, I don't necessarily like what they have done, but then what I'm showing is, you see, the detailing. How did they fix this hollow cross here? How did they fix this hollow cross here? And then the building facade goes in, it comes out. It doesn't look funny, but you have to design that. That's why you are a designer. You must know how to put things together. Okay. Then here, this one here is a project that's somewhere in Europe. I think I cannot remember. It's Albania. Yeah, Europe. That's why I saw that. So it is a very complex design, integrate. But whatever it is, the designer had conceptualized and crafted. So that's that. So these four buildings can stand out as architecture, representative of architecture in the context of what Preston have described, as against this one. This is a building. So, friends, boys and girls, you got to decide, do you want to just design buildings and call yourself designer, or you want to design architecture and call yourself a designer? All right? Now, to be an architect is just not good enough in today's world. You have to transcend being an architect to become an Imagineer, or to become a conceptioneer. All right? Being an architect is cheap. Architects come cheaper by the dozen. You buy a dozen architects, you get 13 numbers. That's what's called the baker's dozen. So for a price of 12, you get 13 architects. Wow, that's value for money. I think this is the sort of thing that's probably happening in India, right? You buy 12, you get 13 architects. Don't be in that 13. I'd rather not be in it and do what I do, because at the end of the day, you must be satisfied with your own life and what you're doing. Now, how do I do that? I make sure that when I put things together, I understand how they are. They have to be looking good. They have to feel good. They have to be excellent. They have to be breaking through the what I call IIC. IIC is the invisible intellectual ceiling, so that you are doing it. Now, how do I do that? I do that by making sure that I try a lot of my ideas first. I do it, and having done it, then I can move forward. You see, as an architect, you have to start by being humble. You got to be humble because when you are in humility, you are looking at things at the grassroots level. You understand what history is, what the environment, what the needs of the people are, what are the issues, the social issues, and historical, and so forth. Then, in the state of humility, prostrated on the ground, you are able to see everything at grassroots. After you've understood all this and have absorbed all this into you, into your inner self, you then start to craft your building along these values. So that what I do is, from the state of humility, I then engage myself in what I call the Tai Chi of Architecture. In other words, Tai Chi is a form of Chinese Kung Fu, where you utilize the energy of your opposition to overcome the opposition, whilst you minimize your own energy. So, in the state of humility, you understand all the things, then you use whatever is there to overcome the problem. And that's what it's all about. You practice the architecture of humility, followed by the Tai Chi of architecture. So, when I first started as an architect, I would come up with some fantastic ideas, which I thought, oh, my client's going to be really happy. But when I showed it to them, you know what they said to you? Where can I see this? Of course, I looked at the guy and I told them, of course you can't see this because it's never been done before. I just designed this, I created this specifically for you. Yeah, at that time I was very naive, thinking that he would be so happy. But then, like all clients, they are short-sighted, they have no taste, they don't understand a lot of things. Only thing they have is they have money, they've got money in their pocket. They have to shake their pocket and you can hear all their coins jingling. They only got that because they got money, and that's the only reason. So, I think in serving people with money, you must remember that you must maintain your self-respect. Not everyone's got money has got taste, has got good manners. So we don't want to do that. We got to teach these people. If you got money, you want something, you must learn to begin to have class. If you have got no class, forget it. Don't worry. Not interested in your project, give it to someone. Get a hall. Get a hall to do your project. Okay? We are not interested. So that's what it is. So what I did is, I thought, look, this is no good. If ever I come a new idea, they want to. So I started my own R&D center. I have an R&D center that's gone on for more than 25 years, and I've experimented with a lot of ideas. You talk about crafting, you talk about tooling, you talk about using timber, you talk about using bricks. Also, I have tried all of them. And therefore, when I talk to people, I talk with authority. Now, what you see here is a picture of a group of students from Kansas University. They visit Malaysia and they always drop in and visit my R&D and see how things are going, what I'm doing, and so forth. It's a very regular basis, and this, I think this was taken January, the 4th of January this year, before the COVID-19 started. So there are lots of people. So at that time we were still permitted to have close, distancing. So that's what it is. So they can have a look at, and you can see from here that there are so many things that we've experimented with here. All the different connections, different timber, the different detailing, different situation, brickwork, brick columns going up, 4 stories high, using recycled components from old buildings. All this we try, and that's very important. So here we are. So here is a view of the space that we have. Right? See, this space goes about 5 stories using glass roof, a lot of recycled material, trying out structural system, a whole series of triangulation, trying to understand what structure is all about, integrating the structure from a handrail down to be a floor support, and then on to become part of a roof. Now, all these are elements of architecture that you have to do it. Unless you have done it, you've crafted with yourself, with your own hands, you've got no authority to talk about anything about architecture. You only talk about figment of your imagination, what you've studied in the classes and so forth. You guys in India really have great opportunity if you do it. Go out to the countryside and learn about your traditional architecture and your heritage. Then, using what is before you, move forward. Because you got to remember one thing. A lot of you have not been taught. Today is yesterday's tomorrow. Just as today will be tomorrow's yesterday. So that's the continuity. We are of the past, and we are today going to be the past of the future. So that is what architect, that's where the linkage is, and that's very important lesson you guys got to learn. Okay? Now, I have to quickly move on, unfortunately, as time runs. Now, here is another example of how we experimented using traditional roof tiles to create something that is attractive. So essentially, when you start to craft your building in this manner, you become an architect who creates your own internal spaces. Who needs an ID in a situation like this? Now, in this sort of situation, is there any room left for the ID? Right, let me tell you a story. Many years ago, we were doing a hotel, 150 rooms hotel in the east coast of Malaysia, for a resort. And then suddenly my client said, "Oh, we are going to get interior designer." I said, "Why do you want an interior designer? There's nothing much for him to say. Oh, yeah, all hotels must have interior designers because that's the norm. Every hotel must have, because you know why they're interior? Because the buildings are so badly designed. So you guys design buildings, then you need ID. But if you have created architecture, you don't need ID anymore, right? So we created the thing, the interior space of the hotel, very, very much like this and all that. So when the building was under construction and it was done, the interior designer realized that there was nothing for him to do there. He couldn't design anything. So the only thing he ended up doing was to arrange the tiles on the main foyer to look like a piece of carpet. So that when guests arrive, they walk in, they think that they're standing on a carpet, but it's not. That's the only thing he did. The rest of the project, he had nothing. He had nothing to do in the rooms. He had nothing to do in the living room. He had nothing to do in it. Okay? So think about that, boys and girls. Oh, here's another view of my R&D station. I'll walk you through. There are lots of things that we've done in it. In fact, we are in the process of producing a series of little workshop type YouTube lectures for my R&D, because there are a lot of lessons to be learned about construction, use of material, and so forth, and how it is done. Here is an experimental stair, right? Using very small members to create stairs and so forth. And this is what the stair looks like, all very open, very sustainable, breaking through the invisible ceiling. And then, because we're in the tropics, it gets hot. So we have a lattice screen, and we have shiplet boarding in a vertical position, all this sort of thing. So we experimented with all this thing. Here is a typical junction which embodies the roof awning, which is supported by a strut, and the strut comes in, acts as an additional strut that comes here to pick up the floor joists, and from here it also becomes a pin joint for the balustrade of the handrail. And because it's a pin joint, we need to triangulate, and this member goes back here. So you create a rigid triangulation, and this member comes down here and over here, comes up here as a triangulation. Then this whole structural pattern is actually sitting on these two cross beams that are going into that direction. So every member here has a function. They are all there to lock itself on this thing and so forth, so that in the event you have this overturning moment of this awning here being resisted by all this and then counterweight by the walkway over there. So it creates a visually interesting solution, right? And it's something that we take a lot of joy to work on. And these are the sort of things which, as architects, we must always try to do. We experiment with things, and that makes our work exciting. So at the end of the day, the topic to conceptualize what and to narrate about what it's all about. It's very important. Right? Here's another view of the same thing. See how the thing comes. This whole thing supports this floor and is part of this whole framing. This has a came in a series of YouTube lectures. See, for example, this stair. I'm going from this space back to where I'm standing. Now, instead of just taking a normal stair, come down, I thought, well, you know, this is the roof line of the gable end. Why not take the stair as part of the gable end up there? And this member here is actually part of the ridge, the roof ridge that comes up and supported here and all. So by a whole series of triangulation of supports and what have you, this stair sitting on this cantilevered platform here, you know, becomes an exciting element. So when people walking through, you know, it becomes a celebration. You know, to go to a space from here to go down, you don't have to always just go down. You can always go up and then go down, or go down and then go up. That's what architecture is all about, having fun. Yeah. Here's another view of it, looking from below. See how the thing goes up and all that. And of course, here I have a column that's supporting this high point with a strut. Here is another triangulation. So here again, yeah, an understanding of structure. Now, any of you that who understand structure would appreciate the complexity of this structure and the simplicity of how it's been constructed. All right? So it's simplicity and complexity. So it's like a woman picking her husband and answer, oh, I want to make you happy with one answer, and yet at the same time it also makes you unhappy. Now you think about what that answer would be and what the question. Okay, so we see that it's very complex, it's so simple. The contradiction, the irony of good architecture. There you are. Here's the thing. Look, the stringers are just two pieces and the structure support. And every part of the structure. Now, where is there any room left for the ID? Hang some drapes here, and you know, that sort of thing, or hang some flags here. Is that the one? I need to do. Okay, hang some strings going on here. So when the wind blow, the strings can show. Okay? Think about it. Now, this is part of a roof. This roof is operable. That means my roof flaps opens up. And so at night when it's pleasant, you open up the flap. Then you think you are in this room where there's no roof over. That's fantastic. Now, at that time, I only had this piece of plank. You see, the thickness of this plank is very thin. It's I know people think and 7 inches, and the span from that column, from this column to this column, was 16 feet. So you can spend 16 feet or something like that to carry roof. So what I did is I experimented using 2 pieces of this wood together. I sandwiched in between with 2x1 vertical members, spaced at about 9 inches apart. And then what I did is I lifted these 2 planks off center. So instead of having them sandwiched in between, I lift center. So because by doing that, I have increased the section modulus of this so-called beam from 7 inches to something like 10 inches. So at 10 inch, it has got no problem spanning 16 feet. In so doing, it creates interesting little patterns here. And all these members are all part of the whole structural system. Now, this is a sort of flitch beam situation. So really, as an architect, you must know how to play around your structure here in this here, on the other side of the room. And these are the ropes that lift this nose up. And here is a close-up detail of how the whole flitch beam works. Right? So it can prod the thing and make it interesting. Here's a close-up of how the split split beam works. Okay. Now, once you understand structures, then you always want to make use of the structure to create beauty. Well, there's just some studies of projects we're working on at the moment, and here we're trying to create a whole series of timber frame support for gallery. That's all. Now, a lot of architects will just draw 2 lines, RC column to engine detail, right? So you need to engineer really screw it up because they've got no idea. So you see, for everything with timber, we're going to show it off so people can see the beauty of timber, and the inside is just all curved, and these are all timber trusses. Right? So architecture is all about detailing, truly doing your stuff. Now, here I just want to quickly walk through 9, 10 or 11 type of details that you use, very common in timber construction. So you have, I'll say, all this time. I'm not going to explain it, it takes too much time. But for those of you who are interested in the sort of things that we do, as I said, follow us and subscribe to us, as we are going to be creating some interesting YouTube program. Follow our work. So now, this is a Salinger's house, all in timber. The whole building is done in such a way that it can be dismantled and relocated. All right. Now, if you look at these 2 pictures, can you tell which was the original location and which is the new location? I'm sure you can't, right? Say 5 years ago, the owners decided to sell the house because they were not staying there anymore, as they were getting old. So someone bought this house, took it down piece by piece and re-erected it. in another site, which has almost similar terrain, and it is now there, living there happily after, like the proverbial story of Cinderella, right? Or is it, I don't know, Cinderella, whatever it is, okay? So, there you are. I'm not going to tell you which is which. Let you decide on your own. Right? Now, these are the interior of the challenges. Look at the amount of detail in there. Yeah. Every part of it has got all these elements to create interesting, intricate details. Can you leave this to an engineer? Or must all this be designed and conceived by the architect, the designer? You want to design buildings? Can you design things like that? And that's very important, right? So, are you an architect or are you not an architect? That's the question. Well, these are other views of it. And figure out the deconstructed building. Okay? So you can see there's no difference at all. It's exactly as it was. Amazing. I'm very happy with that. This is the interior. You see, again, you see this picture of how all these things are joined. See how simple this is. Did you know when the contractors, the carpenters who were building this, they actually made a full-size model of this roof. They erected it on the ground. They tried it, and when they found that everything worked, then they modified and built the real one. Now, that's craftsmanship. And this was done by people literally from the forest. They were just farmers who happened to be carpenters. They did not have CAD program. They did not have Snow White program. They don't have rabbit program. They don't have giraffe. They don't have an elephant. They don't have any showcase. They got no picture, whatever you call it. I don't know. There's so many of these nonsense. Do you know all these things that they are producing zaps your brain? It makes your brain stop thinking. You know, whenever I give talks to Chinese students, you know, it's very easy because computer in Chinese is called 电脑. 电脑 translated means electric brain. 电 is electric, now is brain. So I asked the students when I did a lecture, I said, so now you're using all these computers, 电脑. Now let me ask you, what happened if one day there's no 电, no electricity? So what's going to happen to this now? They look at me, they don't know what to say. I said, but you have a now inside your head. Do you need to get a wire and stick that wire into your head? Huh? For it to work? You don't have to, right? So why don't you use your now and solve all your problems? Do all your drawings. I said, no. Okay, so think about it. The Chinese word for computer is 电脑. All right? And look at this. Look at this detail. All right? Is this the original or is it a rebuilt? Is it? You can hardly tell because it's exactly the same. See, all these components can be dismantled. All this can be dismantled and reused. Okay? So we go on. Oh, okay. Now we talk about the details. This detail is three friends, triangulation. You see, this is using three members to create ventilators. A very efficient way of working on architecture. Now, dovetailing joints. These are dovetailing joints. To do timber work, you must know how these things work, okay? Then you talk mortise, tenon, and lock. That's what how you do mortise tenon. You lock the thing into place and on, and you get rigid joints, and you can always take it apart and move them elsewhere. Okay, and this is tongue and groove. I think a lot of you have heard of tongue and groove. That's about the only thing you probably have heard of, tongue and groove, and probably came in more ways than one, you know. So then this is the bird's mouth joint, which always happens when you have a rafter. It sits on top of the rafter and that sort of thing. So when you use this, okay, then you have dowel. You have dowels at the bottom. What is dowel used for? Is to prevent column shaking. Then you have housing. And ensure that these studs don't move. You house them into your bottom plate or your top plate. And then you nail it. You just cannot nail it just like that. Then you have lapping, how you lap here, you overlap here, you double lap to create strong joints and so forth. Then you have checking, how you check into the whole thing to ensure the whole thing works. Then when you do timber frame walls, you got to have your noggins to keep your frame from separating. Then you have your braces to stop the wall from sagging and so forth. There's so many things to understand. And these are all the tools that help to make your design exciting if you know that you have these tools. You know, design don't just come out of fresh air. Don't forget a lot of the techniques that we have all been built and learned over the years, you know. And it's only when you understand crafting that you can create things like that. Now, this lovely fan vaults of the Gothic architecture. Look at the intricacies. Oh, I tell you, you know, it marvels. I look at this, I feel so, and I think it's so important. So, here, see, then you see, every time you look, see, every corner of the building's got defects. Right? Look at that. So that you turn a corner like that, and then here you turn a corner like this. Here you turn a corner like that. Well designed, boys and girls, where? And yet you say that this is architecture. Please, this is not architecture. Don't. You have to go beyond your IIC. So, my career, this was one of my early projects on the hill. Don't cut the hill. All in timber. Knowing how to craft timber, how to set timber on planks, on bricks, how to have end caps to stop white ends coming up. Then this is a more recent house with all in timber, prefab, all sorts of things, and the one-end house. And then I think that covers it all as far as I have to tell you, because you have to explore what you want to be. You want to be a designer of buildings, or do you want to be a designer of architecture? Do you want to create architecture, or do you want to just create? So architecture is about tooling. It's interesting. I told you that all things are connections joints, and so they created the title for my talk, Tropical Woodworks. But I think in my whole talk so far, I've not talked on timber, tropical woodwork, have I? I've talked about what is to be an architect, about pride to be an architect, to be a good designer, and how an architect should think, how an architect should not give your rights away, your birthright away to engineers by saying to edge detail. You have to stop doing that. You know, if you go to a firm, your firm does that, you're going to tell your boss, hey, boss, we must stop doing that. We must tell the engineer what exactly we want. Okay? I think that's how it is. So, boys and girls, that's the end of my talk. But if you have found my talk interesting and you think there are lots of things you may learn from me, then I would suggest that you go look at our our website. Our office have a website which has got a lot of things, and I will be producing a series of lectures to share and enlighten you about architecture and how to do things. Right? We have an official website where you can also write to us for queries and what have you. But most of all, watch out for a lot. See, this page here is some of the lectures I've given. You may have a look. Of course, I'm not saying that what I've done is the answer, but what I'm showing you is a methodology. So each of you have to develop your own style, your own call. And it's very important that whatever you design, that you're able to stand on your 2 feet and defend your design. Because as you know, there are lots of people out there. Don't expect your architecture to be published or ranked very highly by the West. Okay? If the West were to rank any of your work, they are doing it just as a matter of courtesy. They are being, what's the word? They are trying to be nice to you. So, none of your work, serious as they may be, will ever get published. Very few. The only Indian architect whose work was recognized by the RIB and given the gold medal was Victoria. He had done interesting work at that time, and at that time, the British thought they should have an Indian hero, and they made Charles a hero. So, my passing word is aspire to be good architects. Thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, okay, that's my thing. Okay. What happened? We lost it.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. We will take questions now. There is one question. Do you think the lack of creativity in the system from the fact that the part of the world has increased quickly? Everyone is able to form the next time.
You speak louder.
So could you take the question? Please post your questions on the Q&A to the right. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Not hearing me.
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you, sir.
Oh. So what's happening now? Any questions?
Yes, there is a question in the Q&A box. Do you think the lack of creativity in the field has stemmed from the fact that the number of architects in the world has increased greatly and not everyone is able to form a personal connection with the buildings they design?
Uh, can you repeat that again, please? I couldn't understand part of it.
Ananya, could you just read out the question, please?
Yes, I'll do it. Do you think that the lack of creativity in the field has stemmed from the fact that the number of architects in the world has increased greatly and not everyone is able to form a personal connection with the buildings that they design?
No. Lack of creativity is a result of the lack of commitment, lack of passion, and a lack of the love of the profession. It is really people following strange and false gods. You know what I'm saying? So that's it. There are too many architects in the world, and there are too many architects who are not well trained. And there are not enough good teachers around to tell the students what they should do, how they should do. That's the biggest problem. All right? And this is something which needs to be addressed. It's not just producing designers. You've got to produce designers with a conscience. And you've got to, it's very difficult. I know. You see, because a lot of the schools nowadays, they charge high fees. So any parent who send their children to all the schools where they are charging high fees would expect to have certain return. After all, most of the children's parents are very wealthy businessmen, and all they think of is the ROI. Now, you know what ROI means? For businessmen, ROI means return on investment. So if my daughter or son have cost me to spend $1 million in her education, well, I hope within the first 5 years she would make a return of $5 million US, which is 5 times more than what I've invested for her over the past 6 years. That's all it is. So education has become an investment, and that's what is the biggest problem. So that's where architecture starts to fail. And if more architects start to think along the lines of creating buildings for people and not for ROI, because ROI comes from the development. How many square foot is my building? How much can I sell it per square foot? What's my profit margin by selling at that price? So the buyers suffers, the people suffers. So you're only looking at what's your return on investment. I think you guys should have this word ROI printed 1 meter high all over your college on the walls to remind yourself ROI must not be the driving force. Okay?
Thank you, sir. We have one more question. As architects, what is the most important thing to keep in mind to uphold the integrity of design?
Your own sanity. Your own sanity. You must remember, you must love you don't love yourself, who's going to
There's also one more that's come in. What inspired you to work with timber? Hello, so can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes. What
Are we on?
inspired you? Yes.
Yeah. Well, what inspired me when I was very young, Australia, Sydney. So I went out when I was 15 years old, and after spending about 14 years there, I came back to Malaysia. Malaysia. When I left, it was Malaya. When I came back, it was Malaysia. Then when I came back, I found that all the architecture were not architecture but buildings, boring, like the one I showed you just now. The favorite treatment for all buildings was plaster and paint. Usually, that's what I call P&P, plaster and paint. I think you have that problem also in India, huh? Plaster and all trying to make all your buildings look like Corbusian, all cement. Okay, now, so when I came back, I thought, hey, this is crazy. We're right in the middle of a tropical rainforest area. We got so much timber and so nice and so cheap and so easily available. You want your timber, how much you want, you call the timber yard, tomorrow morning it arrives. So that's how I use it, and I found it very great fun. You see, timber is a nice material, because it's dry construction. So you want to build a bridge, you put two planks over the gap, immediately you have a bridge, you can walk. You try and do that with concrete, you see? No way. Concrete will take you 28 days to do this and that. Then you got to wait for engineers to calculate the steel, bend the steel, then pour the concrete and all. It's crazy. It's crazy, nuts, And you all should stop using concrete. Use bricks, use timber, steel, whatever it is. Right? A few years ago, I designed a farmhouse in Ahmedabad. And that farmhouse, I think, is completely different. You people should make it a point one day to go and visit that farmhouse. It's elevated off the ground, and the lower part were all made of stones and concrete. The upper part was all made of timber, recycled timber. And you know something, when you are in that elevated position, you can see the whole countryside and so pretty and all that. And we even have a swimming pool there. Maybe I should do a talk just to explain about how that farmhouse was made in Ahmedabad. Okay? Hello.
Yes, sir. So we have a couple more before we end. How do you convince your clients to work with timber when they're completely influenced by Western ideas of concrete and glass?
Well, you got to use your gut feeling, how the gut. But one of the best tricks that I always use is, I'll tell people, I say, well, if you use timber, you get a house faster, it's cheaper, and it's nicer, right? So when they hear about it, oh, see, and of course, show them examples, and things like that. But then you see, with businessmen, it's very difficult. It's only like how much money you can save. You tell them you do the same thing in concrete, it's going to cost you 3 times more. Then the guy says, oh, ROI again. Okay?
Yes, sir. Also, we had a comment from one of our attendees. They commented that the prostitute allegory you mentioned is quite problematic.
Sorry?
The statement, so we had a comment from one of our attendees.
Yes.
That the prostitute allegory you mentioned is a little problematic. And they believe that the statement is shaming people who own their sexuality and choose to make money from it. Calling them people with no self-respect they found it a little offensive, and they thought that it was shaming people who aren't conforming to the classical idea of architecture.
Oh, well, I mean,
So just a comment. I mean, it was an individual
yeah,
opinion.
I've got no problem with that. I've got no problem. But let me tell you, I have a lot of respect for you. I have a lot of respect for women who have to go out and earn a living to feed their children that have been left by their husbands. I have seen these women with my eyes. I know a lot of these women, right? Not in my adult days, but as a child. And as a child, I understood why they were prostitutes. And I had a lot of respect for. I have got no disregard. I've got no disrespect for prostitutes. But when I say architects are prostitutes, that I think is disgusting. You know why? You've got education, you've got everything. You've got the rule of the Board of Architects guiding you on scale of fees, and yet you reduce your fee just to get the project. Now, if that is not prostitution, what is it? All right? If you get offended by my stuff, I say a tough banana to you, because the real prostitutes I have a lot of respect for. Architects who prostitute themselves, I've got no respect for them. Okay? Yeah.
Absolutely,
That's
sir.
my
Thank
passion.
you. Yes. And just a final question for you.
Okay, I
So
have
frankly,
to go after this.
yes,
Go
yes,
on.
absolutely. We'll end after this one. So frankly, architecture schools, almost all in India, are creating building consultants rather than making students fall in love with making craft. How do you think that we can change this situation?
Making what?
So rather than making students who fall in love with making that craft,
Ah,
architecture schools, almost all of them in India, they are creating building consultants. So how do you think that we can change this situation?
well, the schools have to change their curriculum. You know, start to get students to craft things together. Sort of, you know, your Indian culture, you're so rich in your culture. You've got how many thousand years of history and culture, and yet none of you are being trained, to preserve the culture. No, you just have to take a look at your houseboats in the backwaters of Kerala. How many schools of architecture or engineering school have ever taken the students to study how these crafts, how these rice boats were made, how constructed for centuries, but now you're replacing them with all fiberglass. What's wrong with you people? I think you guys got to start looking at America. You know, I have lived in Pakistan for a few years, and I know the attitude in Pakistan. The Pakistanis always say they want to go to America. They want to go to America to go and get the green card. So the same thing is prevalent in India. All you think about is going to America. What the hell for? You've got a fantastic country. You've got everything going there. Everything is so much things to do in India. You should do that. Learn from your own culture. Go back and learn your culture. That's what your school's got to do. Your school's got to change your curriculum. This is why I touch on Bauhaus. Bauhaus was centenary 100 years ago last year. Year 2, now we are 2020. Has the Indian architectural education ever changed from the day that it was started? You are still locked in the KRVIA concept. That's all totally wrong. The way architects are trained is all wrong. You all have to change. Then you start to get young boys and girls who are very intelligent. You know, I tell you, all you young boys and girls, you are so intelligent. I know. I've been going to India so often. I know the enthusiasm, the eagerness to learn knowledge is fantastic, but you are not getting the exposure. That's the problem. Change the system. Okay? Maybe follow my YouTube, you know, I'll share a bit more ideas, then you can learn something from that.
Absolutely.
All right.
Anyways, thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. It's been great. So we're signing off now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.